Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the Mormon Movie Reviews, where LDS movie lovers belong. My name is D-Vase, and today is October 4th. This is episode 30, where we will be reviewing Ancient America Speaks. This has a running time of 23 minutes and was released in 1972. Your synopsis: archaeological evidence from pre-Columbian America is compared with artifacts from the Mediterranean region. Visits are made to many historic sites in Mexico, Central and South America. Musical panpipes are shown that are very similar to the Old World. Fabric that is thousands of years old found in Peru is woven from fibers that come from a hybrid of New and Old World cotton. A stone box found in Iran seems to be similar to the box described by Joseph Smith as holding an ancient record of golden plates. Mayan paintings showing both light and dark people are compared to Book of Mormon writings describing two distinct peoples. A possible baptismal font is found in the ruins of ancient Peru. The explorer Cortez used to his advantage, being mistaken for the white and bearded god Quetzalcoatl, who according to the Aztec people had promised to return one day, similar to the teachings of Christ. This was released by the church as part of a 4-in-1 VHS tape set. This review works best if you have seen this film before, though that is not required. We will watch the whole film together while I pause for an insightful, humorous, and occasionally irreverent commentary. Spoiler alert, this review was a monumental challenge for me, as I had no idea what I was getting into when it came to the amount of time that was necessary for a proper review. I'm really not qualified to do such a review, but the people who are qualified, they haven't done it yet, and it's been 50 years, so I guess the task is going to fall to me. As you can see, this is an official church video under the direction of the presidency of the Council of the 12. Now, our commentator here is Paul R. Cheeseman, and he was an American archaeologist and a professor of religion at BYU. Now, Cheeseman's book, Ancient American Indians, Their Origins, Civilizations, and Old World Connections, has been criticized as a poor work of scholarship, most especially by such men as Martin Raish and John L. Sorensen, who also believe that the Book of Mormon is an ancient work and feel that such shoddy scholarship hurts more than it helps true understanding of the book. William J. Hamblin, also a BYU professor, said of Cheeseman's 1985 work of ancient writing on gold plates, it should be used with caution. So even fellow BYU professors are very cautionistic. We saw a couple of PhDs here. These are all BYU professors. Ray Matheny here is a trained anthropologist. Dale Birch is a trained archaeologist. M. Wells Jakeman was a trained archaeologist. And Ross Christensen is a trained archaeologist. All of these research consultants are LDS believers associated with BYU and on the payroll of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which of course naturally begs the question, at least for me, why are there no non-LDS scholars who can speak to the validity of the claims that we're about to watch?
This is a tomb of an ancient leader buried in the ruins of Palenque, here in southeastern Mexico. According to some scholars, this area on the northern part of Guatemala were the cradle of the great Maya culture. Who was this man?
Is it Lehi? Tell me that you finally found him, Brother Cheeseman. What a glorious and blessed day. I have been waiting for this moment for so long, and this is an answer to so many prayers. Let's find out.
And why was he buried in this temple?
I guess he's not going to tell us. I guess we need to pray about it, I suppose. Now, when it comes to the ruins of Palenque here, they are on the Yucatan Peninsula there. There's a couple of different views of them. In fact, this is the Temple of Inscriptions, which he just walked into. It's a medium-sized site, smaller than Tikal, Chichen Itza, and Copan. It contains some of the finest architecture, sculpture, roof combs, and bas-relief carvings that the Mayas had produced. He just walked into the Temple of Inscriptions. That's what we saw him walking up and walking down there. The Temple of Inscriptions has been significant in the study of ancient Maya, owing to the extraordinary sample of hieroglyphic text found in the inscription tablets. We're looking at around the time frame of, 7th, 8th century here. The movie is opening in a temple that was built after the Book of Mormon ends. So I guess it's not Lehi's tomb after all. Now, I actually found a video of what I believe to be this exact Temple of Inscriptions here. And Mr. Cheeseman was not able to give us the answer to his question, but I guess I'm going to have to do his job for him because I'm going to give you the answer to his question.
And there he sees a small corridor. And in the corridor is a stone box. And in the box are 6 skeletons.
We saw the skeleton. We're getting closer.
The remains of souls who were sacrificed to protect the person for whom this temple was built. But he still doesn't know who that person was. And they go in.
This is better than Indiana Jones.
And behind this huge triangular door is a vaulted crypt about 30 feet long and 23 feet high. And inside the crypt is this massive sarcophagus carved from one piece of limestone. But along this edge is the image of a shield. And up in the sanctuary is another image of a shield. And the ancient Maya word for shield is pacal. So Alberto Rus had discovered the tomb of the most important Maya king, Pacal the Great.
Brother Cheeseman wouldn't give us the answer to those questions. I was able to find it for you. You're welcome. So the skeleton that Cheeseman showed was the remains of someone who was sacrificed for the person for whom the temple was built, and that person was Pacal. So what we're seeing here, right in the very opening here of the film wants to establish the idea here that no one knows who all of these places, skeletons, and peoples were, except for Mormons. He doesn't answer the question. So we've left Pacal now. We've left Palenque altogether.
In this silent, sun-swept land, ages ago, a sensitive, cultured people lived out their days. Here they worshipped, built these great structures, prospered, loved, fought civil wars, and disappeared as mysteriously as they came.
We just saw a bunch of different sites across a wide geography. Are we talking about Aztecs, Maya, Inca, or who could possibly forget the world-renowned and heavily studied anti-Nephi Lehis? That's El Caracol at Chichen Itza. We'll talk about that later.
What is the answer to this great riddle, this enigma of the past?
I don't know, Mr. Smart Narrator, white guy, why don't you consult with one of your well-paid PhD BYU professors and return a report? I'm guessing that you're going to tell me that the answer is in the Book of Mormon, I suppose. The biggest problem with trying to answer your question is that you have not even told us which people or what time frame we're discussing. Case in point here, we're looking at an Olmec colossal head. We were at Palenque, then we went to Chichen Itza. Now we're talking about Olmec colossal heads. These are really, really old peoples. The heads date from at least 900 BC. So this is very, very old, in contrast to Palenque, which is like 2,000 years later. So I can't answer your question since we're jumping all over the place with geography through time and space. Now, this is the only time that the Olmecs are directly referenced in the movie. Now, the music here is supposed to evoke mystery, but spoiler alert, anthropologists and archaeologists, they have a pretty good idea to how to answer all of these questions that he's put forward.
The ancestors of these Mayans built an impressive civilization even before the time of Christ.
And once again, Paul does not answer his previous questions.
Some scholars feel that the ancient inhabitants of Central America developed a culture equal to that of the great cultures of the Old World.
Yeah, the Maya developed sophisticated art forms using both perishable and non-perishable materials, including wood, jade, obsidian, ceramics, sculpted stone monuments, stucco, and finally painted murals. This is supposedly a Mayan mural. Where are the white and delightsome Nephites at? They must not be in this one.
The people who lived in Central and South America when these cultures were in full flower over 1,000 years ago, we are intrigued by the comparison with their descendants, the unpretentious and friendly people who still make their homes here.
Their descendants are collectively known as the Maya. They number well over 6 million individuals. They speak over 28 surviving Mayan languages, and they reside in nearly the same area as their ancestors. Now, when it comes to testing Mayan DNA, what's interesting about this particular film is that Simon Southerton, the famous geneticist here, he actually commented on this particular film, and I want to read his comments. He said, "I used to love showing this film to investigators when I was a missionary back in the 80s. I felt very strong emotions that at the time convinced me that the Book of Mormon was true. Modern scholars now distance themselves from all of the major claims of this video. Recently, I discovered that many hundreds of Mayans had their DNA tested. Not a drop of Hebrew DNA was found. They are all descended from Asian ancestors. What a difference 35 years makes."
The The Aztec culture, headed by the great chief Montezuma, was the remnant of a once glorious civilization which foreshadowed it by thousands of years.
So again, we're switching freely between Maya, then we went to Olmec, then we went to Aztec, and now he's referencing unnamed precursor civilizations. I can only assume that the well-known and thoroughly documented Nephite and Lamanite civilizations, that they're going to be covered next, and I just can't wait.
Who were these ancient people who preceded Montezuma? Their origins and what subsequently happened to them are fascinating questions to scholars and laymen alike.
Yeah, Montezuma lived around the time of about 1500 in the Common Era. And again, Mr. Cheeseman, more and more questions are being answered. If you could just answer the question, that would be great. What good are these PhD research consultants? I mean, I can ask a bunch of thought-provoking questions over a montage of Central American villagers too. That doesn't do anything.
Beautiful modern Mexico City is built upon the ruins of several of these earlier cultures.
Now, he keeps referencing earlier cultures because the Aztec civilization is basically way too late for our Book of Mormon civilization timelines, which the Book of Mormon itself gives us. And I guess I have to do the narrator's job for him once again, because we do know the origin of these people thanks to DNA genome sequencing, thanks to people like Simon Southerton. The vast majority of them came over from Asia over the landmass, which bridged the Russian Far East and North America. They came across about 15,000 years ago.
Research has shown that these people were deeply religious, and among many of the cultures, one of the most persistent beliefs was one concerning the great sky and life god called Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah, if this is an ancient mural, I very much doubt that it would have paint still on it. Where are we? When are we? These are kind of important questions.
Although the god Quetzalcoatl is given various names, the illusion is much the same. A fair, bearded person with blue eyes and wearing a light robe.
If you just go to Wikipedia and you'll take a look here at Quetzalcoatl, that's a dead ringer for Jesus, isn't it? It's absolutely uncanny. Now, if you look at the Quetzalcoatl entry here and you search for Jesus, there's no entries anywhere in here. Nobody thinks it's Jesus until you get to the Latter-day Saint movement. They're the only ones for some reason. It's amazing. And we get this incredible quote here from John Taylor in 1892, the third president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He wrote, "The story of the life of the Mexican divinity Quetzalcoatl closely resembles that of the Savior. So closely indeed that we can come to no other conclusion than that Quetzalcoatl and Christ are the same being. But the history of the former has been handed down to us through an impure Lamanitish source, which has sadly disfigured and perverted the original incidents and teachings of the Savior's life and ministry." We're grateful for the wisdom of John Taylor. He's always a font of New World anthropological knowledge.
He counseled the people, taught them, and left with the promise that he would someday return. Quetzalcoatl means feathered serpent, and this symbol is seen in ruins all over Mexico and Central America. It is believed that the feathered serpent is a degenerate symbol created by later peoples to perpetuate the memory of this great deity who left as mysteriously as he came.
Now we're seeing where Cheeseman gets that quote from. Thanks, John Taylor. Now, Jesus in the Book of Mormon, he was only on the continent for less than one day, maybe about 12 hours. He interacted with about 3,000 people at most in one small geographic area in Bountiful. Remember, the ability to transmit information anciently is extremely limited. So it's very hard for me to see how such a narrowly focused one-time visit for a couple of hours to a few thousand people would have had a lasting impact throughout the entire hemisphere. If you go to Fair Mormon and discuss this, do Latter-day Saints believe that Quetzalcoatl was actually Jesus? Well, it's claimed that LDS scholars believe that Quetzalcoatl was Jesus Christ. However, since Quetzalcoatl's association was a feathered serpent, constitutes snake worship, some Christians claim that this association is inconsistent with the worship of Jesus Christ. Many LDS authors have seen Christian parallels to Quetzalcoatl, which we'll see in this film. At least some of these parallels were probably imposed, you think? However, by the secondary sources, which also sought a Christian connection to native myth, Quetzalcoatl plays a minor, if any, role in modern LDS apologetics. And your conclusion, whether Quetzalcoatl can tell us anything about the Book of Mormon, however, remains unproven. Fair Mormon does not at present recommend relying on this as evidence for the truth of the Book of Mormon account. If not even Fair Mormon is on board, then you're just way out there. You are way, way out there, man.
When Columbus landed in the New World, many natives thought that he was this great white god who had returned.
The people of this land believed very firmly that I, Cristobal Colon, with these ships and crew, came from the sky. And in such opinion, they received me at every place where I landed. And to this day, many of them are of the opinion that I came from heaven. And others went running from house to house with loud cries of, "Come, come to see the people from heaven."
I hope whoever read that is getting a handsome royalty check from this film. Now, the quote here that we're hearing from his documents illustrating the 4 voyages of Columbus. If you search for Quetzalcoatl, right, they're saying that that's who he was. If you search for it, guess what happens? There's no results. It's not a thing.
The Spanish conquistadores under Cortez experienced the same type of welcome from the great Montezuma and his people after they landed in Mexico. The crafty Cortez, taking advantage of the legend, told the chiefs he was indeed sent by Quetzalcoatl, and their belief in the great white god was so strong, it is recorded that with this joyful news, they wept for a long space of time and could make no reply.
I found a History Channel video which discusses this particular aspect of when Cortez landed in the Yucatan Peninsula.
When the Spanish arrived on the shores of the Yucatan Peninsula in 1517, every large cosmopolitan center of the Maya world had been abandoned. Maya warriors killed conquistadors by the thousands, but their weapons proved useless against a more potent enemy: disease.
Okay, I'm not seeing a lot of worship there. What I'm seeing is Cortez comes in and there's incredible bloodshed and fighting the entire time.
Cortez wrote back to Spain, describing large cities of 50,000 inhabitants or more.
Now, this is basically true from Cortez's so-called third letter. But why are you telling us what Cortez described at all? He's 1,000 years after the Nephites and Lamanites' final battle. So what does that have to do with anything? Besides, it was well known much prior to the 1830 printing of the Book of Mormon that there were large civilizations in the Americas. And besides, again, the Book of Mormon describes Jaredites as having a civilization of 5 million people or more. It was described as 2 million people plus women and children. And the final battle of the Nephites and the Lamanites is in the hundreds of thousands. So even if you accept what Cortez is saying, which is 1,000 years later, it's still nowhere near to the numbers that are required for the Book of Mormon. This is just a total tangent here. It's a non sequitur.
He mentioned towers of heavy construction. He described aqueducts and water systems of great size and efficiency.
None of which are mentioned in the Book of Mormon.
Just outside of Mexico City, Teotihuacan exemplifies the high degree of civilization attained by these pre-Aztec ancient peoples.
It's the Pyramid of the Sun.
The architecture, the design, the massiveness of these structures even rival the ancient pyramids of Egypt.
He doesn't tell us the names of almost any of the structures, but this is the Pyramid of the Sun in modern-day Mexico. It's one of the biggest and most important pyramids in the New World. But again, even if all this is true, the Book of Mormon does not mention pyramids, and this pyramid was built over 1,000 years after the final Camorra battle.
Mitla in central Mexico exhibits the exquisite workmanship of these ancient artisans who were highly skilled in the art of masonry and in the use of cement.
Mitla is unique among Mesoamerican sites because of its elaborate and intricate mosaic fretwork and geometric designs that cover tombs, panels, friezes, and even entire walls of the complex. These mosaics are made with small, finely cut and polished stone pieces that have been fitted together without the use of mortar. No other site in Mexico has this decorative work.
North and east are the pyramids of Tikal in Guatemala, almost hidden in the lush jungle. This complex served a vast population dating back to 600 years before Christ.
Now, he's referencing 600 years before Christ because that's a very important date for the Book of Mormon because it is supposed to be about when Lehi would have landed in the Americas. This architecture in Tikal, monumental architecture at this site, dates back as far as the 4th century BC, not 600, 4th century BC. Tikal reached its height during its so-called classical period, which is around 200 to 900. So the dates of the civilization, again, they do not match up very well with the Book of Mormon narrative. Now, this is very important. Mayans are the only ones with writing in the entire hemisphere. If you're looking for the Nephite civilization, you really have to look at the Mayans because they're the only ones who had a writing system, and we know the Nephites did too. So you're kind of boxed into a corner.
In this tropical setting was a religious center serving thousands. Copan, Honduras, is thought to have been a great seat of learning.
We're just hopping all over the place. We're in Guatemala, now we're in Honduras. We're just all over the place through centuries of time. No big deal. How does this all tie into the Book of Mormon? Let me just jump to the most important question here, Dr. Cheeseman. Where is Zarahemla? What does Cortez have to do, for instance, with the brother of Jared in the Book of Ether? Can you please tie any of it together?
All of these great cities stretching from Mexico on the north, down through the Yucatan Peninsula, and here at Copan, give mute evidence of the extremely high culture that existed here centuries before Columbus. Francisco Pizarro, a later explorer, made conquests in South America and was amazed to find millions of people scattered over this land from Ecuador to Chile.
I mean, Cheeseman, he's working really hard here to show that lots of people lived on this hemisphere before Columbus. He is going to hammer this fact home, a fact that was easily knowable even to ignorant New England treasure seekers in 1830. I mean, heck, even in 1730.
He discovered complex irrigation systems, including canals and reservoirs still in use today.
That is so cool. These systems of water, they were absolutely vital to Mesoamerican people. It's so sad that they're not mentioned even once in the Book of Mormon. Oops. You know, the North American aqueducts, they were built like 16th century, and the South American aqueducts, a lot of them started around 500. So maybe that's why they're not mentioned. I don't know. This is all after Book of Mormon times anyway.
The coastal plains, thus watered by mountain streams, produced many staple products, including cotton of such unique content that botanists concluded to be a hybrid combination of the Old and New Worlds, and was most likely brought to the Americas by ship or raft.
So the evidence that this documentary is citing for the Book of Mormon's historicity, like canals, reservoirs, aqueducts, cotton, irrigation, they're not in the Book of Mormon whatsoever. While sheep, horses, steel swords, and barley are mentioned in the sacred record, but have never been found.
The Paracas culture in Peru, dating from 500 BC to 300 AD, produced some of the finest fabric in the world. Dyes used in these fabrics still retain their brightness even after 2,000 years, attesting to their superb quality.
We're in Guatemala, then we're in Honduras, then we're in Peru. It's hard to keep where we are straight. The filmmakers don't think that it matters one whit where we are. So long as we're somewhere in America, then we're good to go. You know, John L. Sorensen, the BYU professor and an apologist, he wrote that linens and silk are textiles that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon, specifically in the Book of Alma, chapter 4, verse 6. But neither fabric as we know them was found in Mesoamerica at the coming of the Spaniards.
The craftsmanship in New World pottery making was equal to the finest in the Old World.
Pottery is not mentioned in the Book of Mormon. It's not in there.
Some resembled the ceramics of Asia.
Wait, I thought ancient American Indians were of Middle Eastern descent. Ceramics resembling Asia is not helpful to the Book of Mormon's historicity claims.
Peru, an ancient capital built high in the Andes, Pizarro found this city containing massive walls built centuries before.
Walls are in the Book of Mormon. And here we see proof right here. Evidence of walls. Hashtag bullseye. How could Joseph Smith have known?
These enormous, beautifully cut and fitted stones were assembled without the aid of mortar. In fact, they are so perfectly fitted and laid that you cannot force a knife blade into their joints. Thor Heyerdahl mentioned seeing stones fitted like these in the Old World. Some of these gigantic stones weigh more than 200 tons. Placing them atop one another was a remarkable engineering feat in itself.
Unfortunately, Cusco, Peru is like 1300 Common Era, so this doesn't fit the Book of Mormon time frame anyway. Man, we were so close.
Machu Picchu, hauntingly beautiful, was believed to be a fortress complex built to protect Cusco from invasion.
Now, I'm hoping here that Paul, our narrator, is going to tell us that, I don't know, Captain Moroni or somebody in the pages of the Book of Mormon built the city and left his name behind on a newly discovered glyph that has just recently been translated by BYU scholars. guess not. I mean, Machu Picchu was built in 1500, abandoned in 1700. So that's way after the Book of Mormon time frame. Once again, why are you telling us this?
It is well known that the ancients on the American continent were exceptional goldsmiths. Pizarro recorded that it took 60 Incan goldsmiths working night and day for 1 month to reduce all of the stolen artifacts down to bullion for transportation to Spain. Gold was so common, in fact, that some gold objects were painted other colors to break the monotony.
If goldsmithing among the Inca was common knowledge or as well known as he said, then it can't be used as evidence. And we can see that goldsmithing and gold works really appears a lot in the Book of Mormon. This was well known at the time of the Book of Mormon's printing, as our narrator told us.
Gold alloy was formed into breastplates, and even flat, thin plates have been found much like the aluminum foil in use today. The ancients also worked with copper, silver, and some bronze. These ancient inhabitants were gifted in the art of medicine to an astonishing degree.
Just like we read in the Book of Mormon. Could you just tell us what chapter and verse you're referencing about the medicine in the Book of Mormon? Because I am really getting into this.
They were familiar with the use of narcotics, treated abnormal pregnancies, and even performed successful skull operations.
Yeah, I mean, who can forget that famous passage in Alma where one of the sons of Mosiah gets a much-needed skull operation? Everybody remembers that story. None of this is in the Book of Mormon. So if the Book of Mormon is a record of these ancient peoples, why is it missing all of this information?
But these ancients displayed some of their greatest skills in their engineering and road-building feats. Crisscrossing the land were excellent highways connecting all important points.
Now, roads are in the Book of Mormon, that's true. Dare I say the idea of ancient roads and highways might have been known even in 1830, since, you kind of need roads to go anywhere.
They understood grading, tunneling, and the building of suspension bridges.
The Book of Mormon is silent on grading, tunneling, and the building of suspension bridges.
From Quito in Ecuador to Chile, a distance of more than 3,000 miles.
None of that's in there.
Similar ancient highways are also found in Mexico, such as this one at Cabá.
There's no grading, there's no tunnels, there's no suspension bridges. None of that is in the Book of Mormon.
The pre-Columbian people of Central and South America were also accomplished musicians with a musical scale similar to that found in the Mediterranean area.
I have never once heard this claim, nor can I find anything with which to corroborate it.
The panpipes of the New World are almost identical to those of the Old World.
Really cool stuff here. But for some reason, Mormon, in his abridgment of the large and small plates, he took out all of the music, musical instruments, songs, and the special scales. Panpipes are a musical instrument consisting of the long tubes. They definitely were popular in the Andes. There's no doubt about it. But here's another pan flute from the Solomon Islands. I don't think that the people from Solomon Islands came over to populate America, did they? In fact, they have Greek origin. They're from Romania, Peruvian. They're from America, from all over the world. Panpipes are practically ubiquitous.
They were also gifted astronomers.
Now, this is from Chichen Itza, El Caracol. This is a place that I've been to myself. It's sometimes referred to as the observatory. It's actually the decayed remains of what looks like a cylindrical structure.
And over 1,000 years before the Old World had today's calendar, New World mathematicians and researchers were using a more accurate system.
The 3 calendar systems in the Book of Mormon are internally consistent. The internal chronology of the Book of Mormon is very solid.
Old World influence in architecture is noted in this restored Peruvian ruin.
So were they Nephites or what?
At these ruins near Lima, Peru, many interesting discoveries have been made.
Ooh, like what? Can't wait to hear what kind of discoveries we've got.
Such
here.
as this possible baptismal font.
This possible baptismal font? Dude, no, don't do that. No, stop. No, don't do that.
There is much evidence of a highly organized priesthood in their religious practices.
Actually, the ancient Peruvians, they honored their gods with offerings and ceremonies and paid homage to the dead. They practiced the cult of the dead, and this enabled their people to make contact with the underworld inhabited by the dead and the world above, which is where the gods dwelled. Does that sound like the Levitical, Aaronic, or Melchizedek priesthood to you? Possible font. Sure, it is possible. What is more important when discussing a claim like this is whether it is probable or if scholarly evidence suggests an interpretation with near certainty. Throwing out a wild yet plausible claim is not helpful.
This and other findings indicate that religion was the very center of their lives.
Religion was the center of most civilizations before the Industrial Revolution in many sense. That is hardly an impressive parallel.
These early Americans understood the creation of the world, the Great Flood, the closed ark, the building of the high tower, and the confusion of the languages, much the same as they are found in the Old Testament.
I would give 1,000 ontais to see the footnotes for these claims. I would give 1,000 C9s to see the footnotes of his claims. A Genesis-like creation myth is refuted, first of all, by our modern knowledge of the age of the earth, genetics, and common sense. The Great Flood, that's pseudoscience. The Tower of Babel is a Bronze Age myth. And according to modern linguistics, a confusion of languages 4,000 years ago never happened. So even if we accept Mr. Cheeseman's claim here that these ancient Nephites in the Americas, they believed all the same things as was in the Old Testament, that doesn't help. Even if this incredible claim is true, how can ancient people's alleged beliefs in a variety of scientifically disproven theories be used as evidence in favor of the Book of Mormon's historicity? If these people that he's referencing there that were baptizing in that font, if they communed with the creator of the universe who sent them further light and knowledge through divine prophets, then why would they believe in fables? They would believe the truth. So either way that we look at it, whether they believe it or not, none of this is helpful whatsoever.
Scholars obtained this knowledge from the works of a royal Indian prince, Iztacilxochitl, who was taught the Spanish language by padres who followed the conquistadores. One of these Spanish scholars, named Sahagún, translated the ancient traditions of life after death, fasting and baptism, all basic Christian doctrines.
Bernardino de Sahagún is one of the most important ethnographers who he did come over at around the time of Cortez, Montezuma, that time frame in Mexico. And he was basically the first ethnographer in the New World. He learned the Aztec language, and he also compiled a very, very important history, which became later known as the Florentine Codex. It is one of the first systematic approaches to trying to document what the indigenous peoples of the New World believed in languages that we could understand. Sahagún, he went out and interviewed all of these people and wrote down, and he made sketches of all these people. What Cheeseman is saying is if you read this, you'll realize that they were all Christians. This particular codex was separated into 12 different books, where they talk about the gods, deals with the gods worshipped by the natives of the land, ceremonies, holidays, sacrifices, in which they honored their gods in times of infidelity, the origin of God, astrology and soothsayers, omens, foretelling the future. None of the books that is in the codex is going to reveal a Christian religion whatsoever. Attempting to refashion these diverse peoples, 1500s cultures, into a narrow New England 19th century Protestant construct, that's not only sloppy and wrong-headed, I would call it lazy. Hashtag lazy learners. Let's talk about the supposed New World Christianity in pre-Columbian times. There's a twofold problem with this argument. If the Book of Mormon people were a very small people and they were absorbed into a larger indigenous population, then we should actually not expect to see any remains of their Christian religion behind because they were so small. So if the Nephites were basically Christians and they were small, there would still be a 1,000-year apostasy before the Spaniards arrived. So they were small, a big apostasy. We wouldn't see any Christian influence in all of these documents anyway. So that's method number one. Option number two is there were millions of Nephites on this continent who were basically Christians, just like the Book of Mormon claims. And so we see their influence everywhere throughout the continent, in books, in stories, in pyramids, in ruins, everything. If that is the case, then we should be able to see their DNA, but we don't. So no matter how you slice it, it doesn't add up.
Most scholars today believe that the American Indian is a mixture of many races and blood types.
That's true. They're 99.9% ancestry from Asia.
Recent studies and discoveries also link the Americas with Mediterranean cultures. Similarities between the cultures of the Old and the New World provide us with some clues as to their origin.
What studies are we talking about? What parallels are we talking about? So far in the film, the so-called American to Middle Eastern parallels are very, very weak.
Stone boxes, for example, have been found both in the Old World as well as the New. These boxes often contain gold, jewelry, tools, or other valuables.
Jewelry and tools, they are not mentioned in the Book of Mormon.
Compare this box discovered in Mexico with the one found in Persepolis, Iran.
What does Iran have to do with anything?
The Persepolis box contained two thin metal plates, one of gold and the other of silver, upon which was engraved the record of King Darius.
First of all, we're in Iran. Why are we in Iran? Nobody knows. It contains two plates, not the dozens that are needed for the Book of Mormon. We know how the Maya recorded their documents. They wrote it on a hieroglyphic script on Mesoamerican bark paper. They didn't write them down on metal documents. Mayan paper was more durable and a better writing surface than papyrus. This is how they recorded their lives starting around the 5th century, not on metal plates.
Several hundred different inscriptions engraved on gold, silver, and copper plates have been discovered in the Old World.
That's great. They've been discovered in the Old World. There's been no discoveries of the New World of plates of this kind. And throughout the entire world, no one has ever found an ancient record of the size comparable to the Book of Mormon carved into metal plates, even in the Old World. Because carving things into plates is really, really hard and time-consuming and expensive. Paper is just much better, which is why everyone used paper of some sort. Now, on our hemisphere, only the Maya had a recorded language at all. And when linguists finally started deciphering it, it's like 85% decipher. When they started deciphering it in the 1930s, guess what? They didn't find the references to Zarahemla, Bountiful, Sidon, Nephi, and Rameumptom like many people were hoping for. Book of Mormon characters document here, it does not match the Mayan script. And again, the Mayan, they're the only ones with the written language on the hemisphere. If you want to find Book of Mormon writing, you must go through the Mayans. And their script does not look anything close to the characters document, period. End of story. And I know this document is not 100% authenticated, but it's more than likely than not to be authenticated.
And then in the year 1823, a stone box, much like those you have seen in Latin America, was unearthed in the side of a hill near Palmyra, New York.
Why are they using stills? Because the 1976 churches produced First Vision, it had yet to be shot. It would not be shot for another couple of years. So they have to use stills because there's no live actors.
The stone box was found to contain ancient gold plates with strange engravings upon them, much like those found in Iran.
I mean, not really. The ones in Iran were from an actual language that could be viewed and were translated by scholars, not in a mysterious language that no one on earth has ever known, and on plates that cannot be scrutinized by anybody else. The ones in Iran are like 2 plates long. These are like, I don't know, 60 or 100. The differences here could be multiplied.
This record, when translated, told of 3 groups of people migrating here by ships from the Old World.
We know these are Nephites. In fact, this is Nephi himself, and here's Levi. We've had this big buildup in the film so far. We haven't mentioned Nephites. We haven't mentioned Lamanites. At long last, we are going to start tying everything in. Surely, Mr. Cheeseman is going to let us know the who, the what, the when, the where of Lehi's descendants. I am literally on the edge of my seat here, folks.
The record was found to be God's dealings with some of the early inhabitants of the American continent.
Who were they?
And was destined to change the course of history.
For less than 0.02% of the world's population and shrinking.
It describes the rise and fall of these 2 glorious civilizations that prospered under the hands of the Lord when they kept his commandments and were destroyed when they did not.
So these are the famous Arnold Freeberg paintings which were commissioned in the 50s. Just which civilizations and cities that we just saw in this documentary correspond to these civilizations? Which ones? You just talked about the civilizations in the Book of Mormon. I'm dying to know. And look, he's got the Book of Mormon in his hand. I am just sure that we are about to find out. He's going to tie this all together here, folks. This is exciting stuff.
As we study the stone box at the Temple of Kukulkan, another name for Quetzalcoatl, we see a box very similar to the one Joseph Smith described. Speaking of the lid of the box which he found in New York, Joseph Smith said, "This stone was thick and rounding in the middle on the upper side, and thinner towards the edges, so that the middle part of it was visible above the ground. But the edge all around was covered with earth."
He said that in 1838/1839 in his official history. which would have been 15 years later, approximately, than when he received the ancient record. And at the same time, Paul here, he's fingering a stone that vaguely matches that same description at a temple in Kukulkan. I'm just going to give that for a meme. You have a stone in New York. He describes a stone. Paul finds a stone that vaguely matches the description. Stones, you can find them all over the place there, Brother Cheeseman. Dr. Cheeseman, he forgot that part about the stone plates being guarded by an ancient Indian treasure guardian spirit. He seems to have forgotten that part for some reason. You found a stone box somewhere on this hemisphere that roughly matches Joseph Smith's description of the golden plates receptacle. So the golden plates were in a stone box, and then there was a stone on top of them. So that's your evidence, that you found a box somewhere on this hemisphere that roughly matches the box that Joseph Smith described?
At the time of Joseph Smith, no stone boxes were known to scholars in either the Old or the New World. 11 reputable men besides Joseph Smith were privileged to see and handle the gold record. 8 of them signed the following statement.
Do you see a signature there?
Be it known unto all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people, unto whom this work shall come, that Joseph Smith, Jr., the translator of this work, has shown unto us the plates of which hath been spoken, which hath the appearance of gold, and as many of the leaves as the said Smith had translated, we did handle with our hands, and we also saw the engravings thereon, all the which had the appearance of ancient work, and of curious workmanship. And of this we bear record with words of soberness, that the said Smith has shown unto us, for we have seen and hefted, and we know of a surety that the said Smith has got the plates of which we have spoken, and we give our names unto the world, to witness unto the world that which we have seen, and we lie not, God bearing witness of it.
And we further testify that the records were found by a convicted treasure hunter who dictated the record with his face stuffed into a white hat while staring at a chocolate egg-shaped rock that he stole from his neighbor while digging a well, all the while the golden plates were somewhere out in the woods. And then we could sign that document. Now, these 11 reputable men, most of whom, of course, were related to Joseph Smith. Now, we have spent the entire film short so far showing vague pseudo-scientific evidences. And now we're going to rely on faith all of a sudden?
Evidence indicates that many of these beautiful temples and buildings were abandoned and allowed to decay. Why did these great civilizations die out?
If only I had $1 for all of the questions that Paul couldn't answer, I'd be a rich man. For a guy who has a PhD, he sure seems to provide very few answers. So I guess I'm going to have to do his job for him again. He's standing in front of the main temple there at Chichen Itza, which I've been to several times, actually. And according to the National Geographic, during the 1400s, people abandoned Chichen Itza to the jungle. Though they left behind amazing works of architecture and art, the city's inhabitants left no record of why they abandoned their homes. Scientists speculate that droughts, exhausted soils, and royal quests for conquest and treasure may have contributed to Chichen Itza's downfall. So, what Paul really wants to do is to leave his mostly LDS viewers with the impression that the reason that these places were abandoned was that the dark-skinned and savage Lamanites, that they killed off the white and holy Nephites. The huge problem with that is that the timeline is off by like 1,000 years. Hashtag oops.
Why did the people leave? The Book of Mormon gives us some clues.
Wait, is he actually going to give us some answers? I've got to tell you the answers here that we got from the History Channel first.
Chichen Itza came to be the largest and most powerful city from about 800 to 1050 or so that had a real knack of being a big tent. So it was a very cosmopolitan place, and I'm sure it traded handsomely on that reputation.
We're going to learn a little bit more about Chichen Itza later since they keep coming back to it.
For running throughout the Book of Mormon narrative is the story of 2 groups of people, one light-skinned and the other darker.
Unfortunately, Dr. Cheeseman, he has since passed on. I believe he passed away in 1991. The Mound Builder myth is a story believed wholeheartedly by Euro-Americans in North America well into the last decades of the 19th and even into the 20th century. The central myth was that the indigenous people who lived in what is today the United States were incapable of engineering the thousands of prehistoric earthworks found by the newcomers and must have been built by some other race of people. The myth serves as justification for the plan to exterminate Native Americans and take their property. It was debunked in the late 19th century. But Dr. Cheeseman, he is still gripping onto this myth extremely hard with both hands.
We see possible evidence of this in the murals at Bonampak, Mexico, as well as on the murals at Chichen Itza. and legends still exist among these Indians as to a dark and a light people who lived here anciently. The Book of Mormon also speaks of continual warfare between these two groups. The actuality of this is borne out by the numerous fortifications and weapons found in Mexico, Central and South America. Metal weapons, many of which are similar to those used in the Old World.
Now, of course, he uses the nebulous term here, metals, to describe the weapon. The Book of Mormon mentions brass, steel, gold, silver, copper, and other metals. Yet many non-LDS scholars have concluded that metallurgy was unknown before the late classical times. That's around the time of, say, 7th to 9th century Common Era in Mesoamerica. And steel is totally unknown in the New World. We got some music starting here.
Carved centuries ago in this mountain here in Paracas, Peru, this representation is still called the Tree of Life.
Ooh.
One of the most unforgettable stories in the Book of Mormon is the one called the Tree of Life, given by a man named Lehi. In Izapa, Mexico, is one of the most detailed Tree of Life carvings to be found anywhere.
Okay, so let's look at Izapa Stela 5 here. Is one of a number of large stelae found in the ancient Mesoamerica site of Izapa in the region of Chiapas, Mexico, along the present-day Guatemalan border. These stelae date from roughly the 3rd century to the 1st century before Common Era. They're also known as the Tree of Life stone. It appears to illustrate a Mesoamerican creation myth. What is the interpretation of it? Mesoamerican researchers identify the central image as a Mesoamerican world tree connecting the sky above and the water or underworld below. These individuals further propose that the stele records a creation myth with barely formed humans emerging from a hole drilled in the tree's left side. The associated seated figures are completing these humans in various ways. Julia Kappelman, on the other hand, suggests that the seated figures are Izapa elites conducting ritual activities in a quasi-historical scene, which is framed by and placed in the context of the symbolic landscape of creation. Does that sound like the Tree of Life recorded in the first book of Nephi in the Book of Mormon?
One modern archaeologist who has made a thorough study of this stela has recorded 110 similarities between this sculpture and the story found in the Book of Mormon.
One archaeologist is right. That is aptly put. Yes, exactly one archaeologist. And he was a consultant on this film, M. Wells Jakeman. Jakeman's interpretation is extremely suspect and not widely accepted.
A memorable segment of the Book of Mormon is the portion that tells the story of the visit of Jesus Christ.
Are you referencing the part in 3rd Nephi chapter 9 where he kills countless men, women, and innocent children?
He taught the people, blessed the children, and upon leaving promised to return someday.
Oh, I guess he's not talking about that part.
So great was the impact of Christ's visit to this continent that his story was repeated and handed down by word of mouth for centuries. Many believe that the legendary Quetzalcoatl was, in fact, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, many non-BYU affiliated, totally secular, peer-reviewed, non-church paid employees who have absolutely no skin in the game, they definitely believe that. Or not. Or not. Probably wouldn't, or not.
Is it any wonder then that the natives bowed down and worshiped Columbus, Cortez, and Pizarro upon their arrival here, each time thinking Quetzalcoatl had returned?
The natives were in awe of the Spanish conquistadors because they had superior weaponry and technologies and brought deadly plagues.
And so we come full circle to the question of the bearded white god, the most widely held legend in this part of the world.
Some authors have claimed that white missionaries or God visited America before Christopher Columbus. That's what we're talking about. Authors usually quote from mythology and legends which discuss ancient gods such as Quetzalcoatl to conclude that the legends were actually based on Caucasians visiting those areas and that the Caucasians were really the gods. Spanish chroniclers from the 16th century claimed that when the conquistadors led by Pizarro first encountered the Incas, they were greeted as gods, right? That's exactly what the film is saying, because their lighter skin resembled their god Viracocha. Similar accounts by Spanish chroniclers describe Viracocha as a white god, often with a beard. Okay, so now let's get to the bottom line. The first Spanish chroniclers from the 16th century, however, made no mention of any interaction with a white god. The first to do so was De Leon in 1553. Similar accounts by Spanish chroniclers describe Viracocha as a white god, often with a beard. The whiteness of Viracocha is, however, not mentioned in the native authentic legends of the Incas, and most modern scholars, therefore, had considered the white god story to be a post-conquest Spanish invention. It's invented.
The stories of the bearded white god and these great civilizations of the past are no longer a complete mystery. We have the legends of Iztaccíhuatl and the well-documented stories and records of the Spanish chronicles. And we have the Book of Mormon, which contains the most lengthy and detailed history and emerges as one of the truly valuable and important records to date.
That's why so many scholarly outlets, like, for instance, the Smithsonian Institution, has given the Book of Mormon such a rounding endorsement, or maybe not. Back in the time frame of this film, whenever anybody asked the Smithsonian about the Book of Mormon, they had a lengthy response, which says that the Smithsonian Institution never used the Book of Mormon in any way. The Book of Mormon peoples, they don't come from the Middle East, they come from Asia, that there's lots of anachronisms. They didn't have wheat, barley, oats, rice, cattle, pigs, chickens, horses, donkeys, camels. There's lots of anachronisms. There's no iron, steel, glass, silk, all these other things. And they just said that no reputable Egyptologist says that the Book of Mormon is worth its weight in salt, and et cetera, et cetera. The Smithsonian Institution absolutely slammed the Book of Mormon. Although, since that time, they've modified their statement. If the Book of Mormon is such a valuable historical record, why does absolutely no one use the Book of Mormon for any scholarship purpose whatsoever outside of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? I mean, non-believers still use the Bible in scholarship, but no one does so with the Book of Mormon. When you place the Book of Mormon side by side with these other true historical records like the Florentine Codex that we've gone over, which was truly a revolutionary ethnographic book, it does a huge disservice to Sahagun's life's work.
I have visited Central and South America many times and marvel at the tremendous civilizations which once existed here. I have also studied the Book of Mormon carefully for many years. As I compare these ruins with the events recorded in this book, I have found nothing to discourage me in my convictions as to the truth of this record.
This is hardly a resounding endorsement. I guess Paul here, he definitely has all of the answers to the anachronisms in the Book of Mormon, like some of the ones that we talked about from the Smithsonian statement, which highlights just a few of them. I guess Paul just has all of the answers to horses, elephants, cattle, goats, swine, barley, chariots, silk.
And yet I have found hundreds of examples substantiating the things that are written here.
I have found no evidence to refute the belief that a teapot currently orbits the sun. You see, that's not very helpful, is it, to say I have found nothing to discourage me? He said that he's got hundreds of examples. Can you just give us one chapter, one verse, Brother Cheeseman? Just tie it together. Bring it all home for us here. The ending music is playing. Can you please tie it in?
It is not only a record of an advanced civilization, but also provides us with some profound guidelines for living, which are as practical today as when written centuries ago.
Yeah, some profound guidelines for living. Let me review a few of those profound guidelines for living. God cursing some of his children with dark skin to make them loathsome to their white and delightsome counterparts. Profound guidance. Treasures slipping under the earth to be later guarded by guardian spirits. Justification for Nephi killing an unconscious and helpless man. Women almost completely absent from the book and wholly missing from the patriarchal authority revelatory process. Jesus killing countless men, women, and innocent children in 3 Nephi chapter 9. People's skins becoming lighter based on their levels of sin. God blessing and favoring certain peoples on earth with prophets and revelations with no justification whatsoever for ignoring huge population centers on the other side of the globe. Justifying of a patriarchal polygamous construct in the book of Jacob, not to mention the total lack of advanced doctrines that are brought forth by Joseph Smith in the Nauvoo period. I could go on, but this isn't a film about that. Profound guidelines.
In this book, you will find reassuring answers to questions such as, is there a God? Does man live after death? What is the purpose of man's existence? Why must man suffer? These evidences of great civilizations lead us to some answers with still much to be learned. But both the histories of the peoples described in the Book of Mormon and the remains of ancient cultures found in North, Central, and South America help us appreciate how truly advanced some pre-Columbian cultures were in this hemisphere.
So this is North, Central, and South America for millennia. So the Book of Mormon peoples span the whole continent. That's the only thing I can take away from this film, because they went everywhere to every single major civilization. So much for the limited geography theory. Move over, John L. Sorensen.
This Book of Mormon is true. It's a companion volume to the Holy Bible and the most electrifying and most important record of our time. I testify to you that it is true. And I don't expect you to take my word for it. I'd like to read to you the words of Moroni and urge you to accept his challenge that he has given to you as recorded in his writing. And when ye shall receive these things, I would exhort you that you would ask God, the Eternal Father, in the name of Christ, if these things are not true. And if ye shall ask with sincere heart, with real intent, having faith in Christ, he will manifest the truth of it unto you by the power of the Holy Ghost. And by the power of the Holy Ghost, ye may know the truth of all things.
Please, please, Brother Cheeseman, before you go, read us just one verse from the Book of Mormon and tell us where it actually happened. Just connect one city, artifact, or verse, or people in the Book of Mormon with a real place, a monument, or a tomb, or a glyph, or a civilization. Just give us something. You spent your life traveling to these locations and researching the Book of Mormon. You have a PhD. You'd be doing so much good. You said you had hundreds of examples. Please don't go. Brother Cheeseman. Brother Cheeseman. He went. He references here the Institute of Book of Mormon Projects. So the Institute of Book of Mormon Projects began in 1966. Now, religious education was growing at BYU and expanded to include this project in addition to undergraduate and graduate degrees in the College of Religious Instruction. Their director was Daniel Ludlow and Paul Cheeseman. In 1976, the Institute of Book of Mormon Projects, since 1973 known as the Book of Mormon Institute, was absorbed into the Religious Studies Center in Religious Instruction, and Paul R. Cheeseman remained as the Assistant Director for Scripture. I was not aware of that organization. Paul Cheeseman has written a couple of other books, which I have said that even BYU scholars have said that they have issues with. His Ancient American Indians, Their Origin, Civilization, and Old World Connections has been criticized as a poor work of scholarship. Brother Cheeseman, he has since passed away. And I managed to find his funeral video, which was posted by his son. And I just want to play a little bit of this here. That even in death, Paul is helping us find more Nephite baptismal fonts. Even in death. Hashtag a voice from the dust. I do like these baptismal fonts here. Look. You know, what Cheeseman is actually best known for was his extremely valuable dissertation on Joseph Smith's divergent first vision accounts, for which he deserves significant praise. The film, it never deals with any of the Book of Mormon animals or a lot of the anachronisms that we've talked about. The Book of Mormon references all manner of cattle, oxen, cows, sheep, swine, of goats, as well as horses and asses and elephants. It mentions all of this being in the New World prior to Columbus, none of which were. Whereas llamas, alpacas, turkeys, jaguars, we know that they were there, they're not in there. So it's a double whammy. The central premise of this film is that no one knows what happened to all of these ancient peoples in the Americas except for Mormons. This is an abjectly false claim. Now, the Maya probably left many of their cities because of persistent droughts. And so since the film refuses to get into this, the Maya probably left their cities because of droughts.
This would not have been enough.
We find 8 of these bands that suggests, in fact, that it wasn't just like one massive drought. It was probably a series of droughts that have durations of about 3 to 20 years. And, you know, every time things would get going again, they would get pounded with a fairly long duration drought.
That's how scholarship is done. You're looking at tree rings and you're doing actual research, which is not what we saw in this pseudo scholarship of the film. Now, after the droughts ended, the Maya did not end up returning to their cities because their formerly stable governments had collapsed.
Maya lowlands is abandoned overnight. It's that, you know, one kingdom falls here and another one 10 years later falls over here.
We're really talking about a society that was pushing itself to the limits.
There is no one single explanation for this implosion, but scholars seem to believe that environmental catastrophe led to a full-blown meltdown for the Maya civilization.
So the Mound Builder myth is absolutely been refuted. It is a myth, and as all of these different scholarly articles and somewhat scholarly articles have proved, That is not the reason that these civilizations collapsed, was because of a white-skinned people being eliminated by a dark-skinned people. That is a myth. Now, the film spends considerable time suggesting that Quetzalcoatl is Jesus. And I found this National Geographic clip here, which talks a lot about that.
Ringel wants to show Bay how these buildings underwent a peculiar modification in the 800s. An unmistakable new image was added to their facades.
What's really interesting is that little image right there, a feathered serpent. And actually, there are two feathered serpents here. When they intertwine across the facade, you need visual images.
Ringel believes the serpents are a symbol of a powerful religious cult. It was called Quetzalcoatl, or the feathered serpent.
The so-called cult of Quetzalcoatl, perhaps a better way to think about it, is a political ideology. And of course, it had religious overtones. Cult's perhaps the wrong word, because it suggests something kind of small scale and extra governmental. This was political ideology, front and center.
To gain admittance into this cult, a local king, like Kiwix, had to submit to a rigorous initiation.
And the priests would very often sequester the initiate for several days. He would undergo rituals of self-mortification.
Artwork from the time depicted rituals involving bloodletting ceremonies, in which initiates pierced their penises and other body parts.
That would be a very interesting way to sacrifice yourself.
Hashtag no thanks. So the Maya, they practiced ritual sacrifice. Mayan priests, they made holy pilgrimages to sacred sites and consumed hallucinogenic substances to commune with the gods. They were not 19th century New England Protestants. Now, the church still has up on their website legends of the Peruvian gods, of the white god legends. They just can't seem to let it go. Even though this is 1984, they haven't taken it off of their website yet. Now, this is from D.F. Green, who is a Mormon archaeologist, who says, the first myth we need to eliminate is that Book of Mormon archaeology exists. If one is to study Book of Mormon archaeology, then one must have a corpus of data with which to deal. We do not have that. The Book of Mormon is really there, so one can have Book of Mormon studies, and archaeology is really there, so we can study archaeology, but the two are not wed. At least they are not wed in reality, since no Book of Mormon location is known with reference to modern topology. Now, Michael Coe, probably one of the most well-respected and famous archaeologists in the New World, probably knows more about New World archaeology than anyone. He said in an article in Mormon Archaeology in the Dialogue magazine in 1973, he said, let me state categorically that as far as I know, there is not one professionally trained archaeologist who is not a Mormon who sees any scientific justification for believing the foregoing to be true. Nothing, absolutely nothing has ever shown up in any New World excavation which would suggest to a dispassionate observer that the Book of Mormon is a historical document relating to the history of early migrants to our hemisphere. So far as it is known to the writer, no non-Mormon archaeologist at the present time is using the Book of Mormon as a guide in archaeological research. No non-Mormon archaeologist holds that the American Indians are descendants of the Jews, or that Christianity was known in America in the first century of our era. All of the basic claims of this film, they're on such a sandy foundation. I flew to many of these archaeological areas that are shown in the film in the 1990s with my father in a small Cessna plane. We spent 3 weeks flying from site to site to site in Costa Rica, Guatemala, Belize, Mexico, and Honduras. We visited the vast majority of the sites that are in this particular film. And I have been back a couple times since then to visit some of my favorites. Now, those are treasured memories that I have with my father, who has since passed away. But much like the church-backed New World Archaeological Foundation that was trying to find Zarahemla, I want to inform you that we were not able to find Zarahemla either. Now, I want to close with the current church president, President Nelson, who gave an important talk about the Book of Mormon in the 2016 seminar for new mission presidents. And I found a lot of resonance in this particular passage here in which he talked about it, and I'm going to close on this. There are some things that the Book of Mormon is not, President Nelson said. It is not a textbook of history, although some history is found within its pages. It is not a definitive work on ancient American agriculture or politics. It is not a record of the former inhabitants of the Western Hemisphere. Now, my favorite part is it is not a textbook of history. I'm going to leave you my testimony that what President Nelson said there about the Book of Mormon not being a textbook of history is true. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this Mormon movie review. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And join us next time for another episode of the Mormon Movie Reviews, where LDS movie lovers belong. So long.